you're getting shots of horse pee or something. Don't you get shots of horse urine or something?
Well, that's where they get the human chorionic gonadotropin, right? Okay, so we have some people today who are having surgery tomorrow. We were talking about their experiences with diets. Diet experience. So we had one diet where you had the injections of HCG. And there's thoughts that where do you get HCG, and they purify it from the urine of pregnant horses. No, I don't. That's true. So there was a claim here made by somebody from rural Utah. So we don't.
I live on a farm.
So we don't know if that's really true. Who knows what they're doing out there on the rural farm in Utah anyway. So okay, so you went on a diet. You had only 500 calories a day, with the plan being, with the shots of the HCG, you would lose 40 pounds in 40 days, and then after that you'd be kick-started on this new lifestyle, exercising and eating differently. And were you in a treatment facility? No, at home. Where would you get your shots?
We would drive to Pittsburgh.
You drive to Pittsburgh for a shot of
every other. Well, no, I have my shots at home.
Shots at home.
Did them every morning, but.
So you would take your own shots. You were injecting yourself with HCG.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we would go.
And on 500 and go to Pittsburgh, right? Now we have a support group, a 2-hour drive. Okay.
And they gave me a list. I could only eat like certain foods. Like I could have maybe like chicken and broccoli, and there was a really small list.
Right.
I'd have 3 green apples a day. And I got to the point.
Those red apples would ruin the diet.
Yeah, you weren't allowed to have them.
Green apples, okay. Red apples, okay. And does this diet have a name?
It was.
We better not say it. It'll probably just get us in trouble.
Yeah, it was just fun.
We'll call it some diet in Pittsburgh.
But I got to the point where I couldn't eat the same thing, every day, and so like one time I had like a little pack of like Kraft macaroni and cheese. It was 250 calories, and I just ate that, and then I had my other 250 calories. And when I went until I lost maybe like 6 pounds, or I lost like 12 pounds, however long, and it wasn't enough. And they said, oh well, if you eat anything other than this food, it doesn't work.
Right.
So they said that's why.
So the mac and cheese, the 250 calories of mac and cheese was that ruined it. Right.
The way, yeah.
Right. So what is the deal? Let's talk about this. Have you heard this story? Weight loss, obesity, all this stuff is complicated just because people want to make it complicated. It's really simple. It's calories in and calories out. If you cut back on your calories and you burn more, you're going to lose weight. Have you heard that explanation?
Yes.
Right? So if it's that simple, then it also means that all we have to do is tell you, as a heavy person, that it's so simple, that all you have to do is eat less and exercise more, that if you don't succeed, there's something wrong with you. Have you heard that?
Yep.
You're weak. You lack willpower. You lack character. You're not that bright. You don't realize that fatty foods are bad for you. Have you heard that? Mother did not like you best growing up. And so in deep sadness because of the lack of love of your mother, who was cold and turned away from you when you wanted a teddy bear, you now eat Boston cream pie to make up for that loss of love. And if you meet with me twice a week for the next 2 years for $100 an hour, we'll exorcise those demons. We'll get to the root of your sadness. And we'll make you feel better. Have you heard that? Right? Okay. I want to talk to you about your breathing. And then I'm going to come back to talking to you about the hormonal control of your eating. Imagine that I have decided, and you agree, that you're breathing too darn much. You're just a fatty breather. I notice, and we agree, you're breathing too much. So I want you to use your intellect, your brain power, and I'd like you to cut it out. Stop all that darn extra breathing. It's just too much for you. It's simple, breathing in, breathing out, and you're breathing too much. So stop it. Okay? So just as an example here, hold your breath for the next 6 or 10 minutes, and I'll turn off the video, and I'll turn it back on, after 10 minutes have passed and you've held your breath for 10 minutes? Not going to happen, right? Okay. Why? Because deep inside in the primitive part of our brain is a powerful control system, and it says you can try and hold your breath. But a couple of minutes in, you're giving in. Because you can't, with your powerful intellect, overwhelm that primitive reptilian part of the brainstem which controls your breathing. Period. You could say all you want. You could take horse urine, you could take a 500-calorie diet. You're not going to change your breathing because it's so tightly controlled by a primitive part of you. You cannot overcome the control of your breathing because it's under such powerful primitive control. You cannot control your eating because it's under such powerful primitive control. So when you have this calories in, calories out explanation, we're thinking that eating is purely an intellectual decision. And what we would like to tell you, I think the recent research on the hormones ghrelin or ghrelin and peptide YY suggests that, like your breathing, your eating is under a powerful, primitive hormonal control that's far beyond what your intellect can do. And so you sitting down with a psychiatrist might be a wonderful thing for your mental health, but it's not going to change your rate of breathing. And similarly, I don't think it'll change your rate of eating. And diets, like holding your breath, can transiently cause weight loss, but this powerful primitive system that controls our eating is one that is not overcome by a short-term diet. And so we think that the dietary programs that you guys have tried are doomed to failure, not because of your lack of willpower or the one breach of the dietary guidelines, but because underlying is a system that's as powerful as the one that controls your breathing. And your system is broken because you're heavy. It's got a new set point that's too high for you, but you can't fix it by a diet. And that's why we don't think a diet is going to work, and that's why we think so many weight loss surgeries have failed. They lack the power to overcome this broken system.